Welcome to Revenue Mind, where revenue leaders get real about mental health. I'm Jolie. Stick around for honest stories, practical insights, and why well-being is the real bottom line. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Revenue Mind, a podcast where revenue leaders talk about all things mental health. I'm Jolie, your host, and with us is David. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Jolie. Excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So before we dive in, what makes you, you?
Oh, you're starting with the tough questions again. I'm me. So I live in Los Angeles, from Ireland, but I've lived in the US for 10 years now. So 5 years in New York, 5 years in LA. I have a son who's 3 years of age, and my wife is also Irish. And, what makes me me, I think I'm like that crazy mix of exciting. I think of myself as a salesperson, a marketing person, but then I get to run early stage startup companies. And so I have that, I don't know, yearn or need to go and build stuff. And so I have the privilege to launch and build software for the last 10 years. And I think what makes me me is that I'm very grounded with a lot of structure, I would say, outside of work, which allows me to be a little bit, risk on in work. And so hopefully that answers your question, what makes me me. It's quite a complex, you know, question to ask because there's so many aspects to my personality. I'm happy to tell you a bit more about it.
I love the answer to the question. I think everyone has, like you said, different aspects to the personality, but I think you summed it up really nicely.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So now to the questions. Looking back on burning out while growing your last company, what advice would you give yourself about managing stress?
Gosh, that's a good one. I think with everything, it ebbs and flows, meaning when you're having moments that you're super, super stressed and it can kind of compound. Like, what's the old phrase when everything comes in threes. So when everything goes wrong, it gets really intense. I think recognizing that and being aware of how the natural human instinct is to compartmentalize and compress and then maybe just like move on and forget about it. And if you do that too often, you just have to get time to disconnect and be off the grid. So looking back, I think maybe being a bit more aware and a bit more, give yourself a bit more grace than I did because I was working so hard all the time and I was always on and I loved what I did, which Jolie, I think that's the key. It's like, although I was stressed and, got, burnt out to a certain degree, I was also loving my work and I was so invested in my work. And that kind of merges your life and your work together into one, and your personality and your makeup becomes your work. And that's just kind of dangerous from time to time. You need to be able to be yourself and be a human and not be Dave. I'm in work. I'm a founder. It's like, no, I'm just Dave. I'm a normal human being. I'm a person. So being able to disconnect and get time by yourself to be yourself and be a normal person is super important.
I think the move to remote work has really blended the two together because, and actually, the very first episode when I talked to Chris Walker, we talked about this. So it's like you wake up, you're at your computer, you go to sleep, wake up, the computer's still there. There's no differentiation between your home life and your work life. So it can be tough.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So getting fired from Indeed, you mentioned was a turning point. How did it shape your approach to leadership?
Yeah, well, this might be controversial, but I honestly think that for the most part, not every person, but like I personally had an experience where yes, it was a bad experience to get fired, but I think it should happen to everyone at least once in their career. I was fortunate that it happened to me earlier on in my career. So I didn't have as much responsibilities. I didn't have a mortgage, a family, a kid, so I was able to bounce back very quickly. But what I taught me was that no job is secure. You're only as important to, you know, to a company as the value that you bring to that company on a consistent basis. And for the most part, corporations in America can, make decisions that are business decisions that, yes, they like you as a person and a human being, but they're making a business decision because things change. And so a lot of the time, those things are out of your control. It's just the market conditions or, you know, changes in the business model or unfortunate circumstances within a startup company. So I've actually been fired twice, once from a big tech company and once from a small tech company. And then, you don't know this, but I also had to let go of 40% of my staff in my last company in one day. So I had to meet with 25 people back to back at 15-minute meetings and let every one of them go. And some of them I knew for 4 years and kind of had grown up with them. So I have the experience on both receiving end twice to then having to do it myself at my own company. And through that experience, I knew what it felt like. And so I tried to deliver, the best possible message. But, letting people go is incredibly challenging and difficult. And so I suppose fortunate, blessed and cursed to have those experiences, at such a young age on both sides. But to be honest, I wouldn't change it for the world. And I think getting let go at the early stages of my career was actually the thing that propelled me to go on and do better and bigger things.
That's amazing. And how did you approach letting people go? I'm always curious about this because I've always been on the end of getting let go, but I've
Mm.
never been the leader having to tell 25 people that they no longer have an income. So I love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I just dropped a bomb on you with that one. You know, there's no easy way to let people go, no matter what you do. You're impacting people's lives and their livelihood. And so I think it's very important to be transparent as much as possible, be truthful, and be direct in your communication. I think you have to be very clean with how you communicate and how you deliver a message and deliver the message thoughtfully in the right way, in the right format. And also just like between you and me, like do the right thing. You're letting people go. Don't screw them on the way out. So try give as generous a package as possible. Try help them outside of, when they're transitioned out of the business to help them in their career, help them in their new opportunities. But there's no easy way to do it. And everyone reacts to it differently. You go into it thinking, oh, I know these people, I know them inside and out. I've worked with them for 3 or 4 years. You expect a reaction to the news, either positively, or, accepting it or a very negative and reactive reaction. And often what you think you're going to get from one person isn't actually, what shakes out. So very difficult to do, but kind of the keys are speak candidly, directly, deliver the message thoughtfully, do whatever you can to help them in that period in time, and then stay connected with them for the most part, the ones that you think you should, give them the space, but stay connected with them because you never know what could happen.
Yeah, I love that. And something you said before made me think of even honestly, not just the big corporations of the world, but really any business. We are numbers and it is going to be an impersonal decision. So feel like and feel free to chime in. I feel like the new movement is to have your own thing because you are protecting yourself from corporate America. Essentially, I feel like there's a huge movement toward that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there's one way to be disposable and it's to be, the owner of the business. Then it's very difficult to be disposed. Now, I will tell you that sometimes you have to remove yourself from your own business, which is also difficult to do. Also, something I did in my last company. So I have this weird belief that corporations are incredibly complex but also incredibly powerful. If done the right way, you get a group of people together to work together on a certain mission and to accomplish something. And, my wife works for Netflix, where they have a very aggressive policy around people where it's like, we're not a family, we're a team. We're only as good as the team and how you perform. And if somebody's not performing on the team, you're letting the rest of the team down. Whereas somebody's not performing in a family, you feel compelled to help them and support them, even if they're not pulling their weight. And so there's this weird dynamic in organizations that are for profit organizations where you do your best work when you're surrounded by great people. But at the same time, you need to be aware of people who are maybe potentially underperforming. And act upon that in the right way, help them, support them, but be candid and transparent with them about what your expectations are and what the reality is of what they're delivering. And, corporations in America are ruthless, you know, and I think knowing that and being going in eyes wide open is very important and helpful. You can't be resentful to your employer because they're a corporation, and they're putting food on the table. But, you can be aware that you need to deliver value to get paid.
Yeah. So speaking of all of that pressure, you are currently at a seed stage company. Pretty intense. How do you know when to push and when to step back?
I'm still learning that one. The truth is that I'm all in all the time, you know, and it's a superpower in the fact that I don't actually think work is work. I wake up at 7 in the morning and most people say, go outside, look at sun, go for a walk, relax. Like I look at my email and it's not healthy. It's just not. But I know that it's what I need to do in this short period of time to get this company off the ground. So when I wake up at 7 in the morning, I'm looking at my email and I'm responding to things immediately. Sometimes I'm looking after my 3-year-old son at 6 in the morning and I'm doing the same thing. And sometimes I feel guilty about it, but then the other times I'm like, I'm moving business along and I'm responding back to things and I'm online and I'm helping generate value for the business and grow the company. If I don't do it, nobody's going to do it. So I have to set the pace. If I'm going to sleep at night, 10, 11 p.m., I'm doing the same thing. So it's not for everyone, right? But until you've built something yourself and you're fully responsible for growing a company, you can't know what it feels like for your work to not actually be work, to be your baby. It's your creativity. Like you're bringing yourself to work, you're solving problems every day, but you're doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for anyone else. And I mentor a lot of entrepreneurs, or people come to me with certain ideas that they want to jump into entrepreneurship, and I'm like, are you sure you want to do this? Because like it's all encompassing. You can't go half in. You can't dip your toe in and then stop, right? You are all in all the time. And if you're not, you're going to fail. It's the truth long term. You might get lucky, but for the most part, you're going to fail. So you have to love what you're doing and you have to be very deliberate about what you're trying to build and what you're trying to accomplish. And then, to know when to step back, I think there'll be days that are hard. There'll be weeks that are hard. There'll be months that are hard. And then there'll be weeks that are incredible. And there'll be days that you just like, you're on a high, and that roller coaster of emotion of like highs to lows isn't actually sequentially like every week or every month. It's actually every hour, meaning I'll be like extremely excited about, closing this new business deal with this $7 billion well-known brand. And then 2 minutes later, I'll be like, oh no, there's fraud on this account. And we need to like, solve this issue. And there's these fires going on. And if we don't do it, like the whole company's going to fail. And so that yo-yo of emotion, you have to be you have to understand how to come in and be level set and not overreact to the highs and not overreact to the lows. And I've definitely done that in the past, in previous companies. And now I feel a little bit more mature where I'm able to feel a bit more balanced and a bit more longer term thinking than, the short reactiveness. But in answer to your question, I'm always on, and I feel like it's a superpower, but I'm aware that I'm very intense and it's just part of my personality.
No, I love that because it's funny. Some people are always on because they have to be, and some people are always on because they want to be. And actually, I'm starting something. It's in the works at the moment, and I'm doing it on top of an agency, and it's it's a challenge. But I get it. It's something that I don't feel like it's work. I feel like if it takes off, I could really make a difference in this world. So it's just like that. I completely understand that feeling of like, this is my baby. I will wake up at 7, work for 2 hours, and then play with my kid. Well, I don't have kids, I have puppies. But play with my kid, go throughout the day, work till midnight. Listen, just I that mentality is like when you're so passionate about something, it just feels like you would do anything to have it succeed.
Yeah, I agree with you. And then sometimes I just want to relax, and it's the weekend and I'm like, can you just not think? just like relax. And even in the moments of like the times that I'm sitting beside a beach or, I'm sitting down and relaxing, I'm usually trying to problem solve in my head around something that I've just thought that I need to problem solve on. And so it's a double-edged sword, you know. Do I envy sometimes the idea of like being able to just like really sit down and relax and take a few hours to just like, you know, focus on myself or read a book? Sure. But I do that and then I get bored and then I get upset and then I get frustrated and I'd rather just be problem solving in my head. So it's a sickness, but it's also helpful to have that mindset when you're building companies.
Like, I think it's one thing to be like a self-proclaimed workaholic. I definitely am. But I think it also is important to find that balance once you have everything up and running. Now, you're always going to be in control. You're always going to have the vision, the strategy, and everything. But something I'm trying to do actually personally is find that balance because I have none. I'm a lot like you.
Mm, mm. To react to what you're saying, I think the best scenarios of managing your and being able to disconnect at an early stage is hiring exceptional people that you trust around you to execute the things that and take the initiative before even you do to put in the work and you trust them to deliver without needing to look over their shoulder. So I always strike the right balance or try find the right balance of like, okay, I can be super intense and very on and very focused for a few hours. And then there's times where I see something pop up and I'll just assume that my other team member, because I've spoken to them, is going to execute on that and not get worried about it. So the ability to scale and grow, is there's only one way to do that, and it's to hire really great people that you trust around you. So I'm at the stage right now, just to be transparent, where I've got 4 employees. So, and I'm the one in charge of sales, marketing, finance, operations, hiring, yeah, accounting, etc. So I'm in charge of every department other than product and marketing or product and engineering. When I hire people to take over some of those responsibilities, I'll definitely be able to take a bit more of a break or a bit more time off here and there. So I hear what you're saying. The only maybe caveat to that is when you get over a team of 20 people, let's say, my last company, I got up to about 75 people. When you get over 20 people, people become the issue. People management becomes the issue. Like managing personalities and how do they work together and like who's responsible for what and how do you get high output from this team of people who know what to do and know where they fit within the organization. You spend all of your time instead of problem solving on a specific thing and doing it yourself in organizational design and structure and how do I get the best out of my team and communicate with my team. So there's a power to that if you do it the right way, but it can go wrong very quickly and inefficiencies can be built in. And so that's why I love early stage startups with small teams much more than I like bigger teams because you can move quicker. It's clearer lines of communication, less bureaucracy. Yeah. So that's why I am where I am, I suppose.
At the end of the day, it's all about trust, right? You got to trust that they're going to care just as much as you do. Does it ever get lonely at the top?
Hmm. You say the top as if it's like, I always think of it, I never really think of it as like a hierarchical, meaning I like the job of CEO and founder. I like being the boss and being responsible for everything. But I don't look at myself in that lens all of the time. I look at myself as somebody who's going to get in and problem solve with any team member on any little task, no big, doesn't matter how big or small it is. But to answer your question directly, does it get lonely? Of course it does. Entrepreneurship is the most lonely job. People put it on a pedestal and say, oh, yeah, this is going to be all me playing golf and living on the beach and making money and having fun. Like it is the complete opposite. Of course, I get to play golf and I can have my own freedom and I can, decide my own calendar and schedule and I can take time off if I want to. But when you've got an enormous amount of work to do, you don't even get the time to take the time off. So is it lonely? Yeah, sure. I think it is because you're essentially responsible for everything, start to finish. And there's great power and excitement in that. And it's what gets me up and motivated is that I'm fully responsible for the business. But it's also can be overwhelming and stressful and lonely because you've no one else to talk to relate to. So when I speak to my friends outside of work, friends that I've known for a long time, it's hard to explain what you do in work and how you you don't have as much in common because they don't know what it's like to found and run a startup software company and grow it, you know. So finding people who have similar experiences or interests is very helpful. And I've tried to invest more into that. I've failed, if I'm honest with you. So I'm still that lonely CEO and founder who's just building software in his spare bedroom and having fun.
You're like that, was it Microsoft or Apple that's in the garage?
Yeah, yeah, my home studio, but it looks like a garage.
Exactly. So you mentioned a little bit about your friends. So how with this concept of loneliness, how do you stay connected and find purpose?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose, like with friends, I have a very clear line of communication. Like, I don't use my WhatsApp for work ever. And I've had people try WhatsApp me or try text me about work, and I'll be like, email me. Like, do not pollute my only channel that is not commercially driven, which is my WhatsApp and my text message, or sometimes even my phone when people call me. So I suppose that's like number one. I have very clear channels, right? WhatsApp is for friends, family, and communication of that sorts. I think I have friends that I have in common that I would speak to a lot about like ongoing sports, for example. Like I'm a big rugby supporter. I used to play a lot of rugby. I actually played for my province in Ireland. And at one point wanted to go professional and then got a few bangs to the head and concussions and decided probably not the right move. I actually value my brain a little bit more than playing rugby for a career. Maybe that's why I have a few screw loose, to be honest. But you know, I stay connected to my friends through sports and through WhatsApp groups and through chats and conversations. And more recently, like going to weddings, I haven't been to that many, up until a few years ago. And now I get to see my friends every so often. And when I do, and I fly back to Ireland or we fly to Europe or we go to some, wedding somewhere, it's like I saw them yesterday. Even though we haven't chatted every day about whatever's going on, still have close friends that I would say like doesn't matter how long we don't see each other and it still goes back to the exact same as if we saw them yesterday. So, you know, I have trade-offs. I live on the west coast of America. It's 11 hours on a plane away from my family and friends, and that's challenging, but we make sacrifices and I love my life here. I love what I'm doing and I'm happy. So that's all that really matters.
That's awesome. What inspired the move to the US?
I originally came over on a student visa for 3 months. Was finishing college and I had a 3-year bachelor's degree instead of a 4 years. Don't know why. It was a commerce degree. And so I finished a year ahead of everyone. And so between my second and third year, I decided to go to the US and I went to East Hampton in Long Island in New York City for 3 months. And I worked in restaurants and I had the best summer of my entire life. And I was like, oh, wow, I want to live in the US. This is amazing. And so, yeah, finished my last year in college, packed up my bags, came to the US, worked in restaurants and bars. I actually I ran a Mexican restaurant in the Hamptons for a long time. And then I ran a cocktail bar in Manhattan in the meatpacking district. So came up in the hospitality industry and enjoyed it a lot. I just love the fast paced nature of it. But I always planned to move home to Ireland. I just never got around to it. Just ended up staying. So yeah, we're here now 10 years.
So I'm definitely feeling some synergy with some type A energy
Yep.
between the two of us, which is a lot of fun. Speaking of, next question. You're big on breaking goals into smaller wins. How has that shaped how you lead at Limelight?
Yeah. I think it's very important when you have an ambitious team to set lofty goals that are absurd. Like, we are going to go and change the world. And when you set that type of crazy, I'm going to go and innovate and change an industry, you realize that it's invigorating, it's exciting. People get like motivated by it. But it also has a flip side where you can get overwhelmed. There's so much to do. Like, we're so far behind from where we need to be. And so I've always found it really important to be able to set the long-term vision of the goals in the company. Like, here's where we want to get to, and here's the promised land. And then break it all the way down to like, here's the next 30 days. Here's what we need to do in the next 30 days. Just focus on this. And I think as founders and entrepreneurs in early stage startups, there's such a power in being able to focus on the right things. You only have so many hours in a day, and I'm constantly trying to multitask across 10 different tasks. As I've matured slightly, only slightly, I've realized that like I need to be very focused on a handful of things and do them really, really well. And so setting big lofty goals, breaking stuff down into monthly goals and objectives, and then setting your own like essentially like incentivizing yourself. There's nobody to tell you you're doing a good job. Like any other company where you have like a boss or, you know, a director who do shout you out at the end of the week, it doesn't exist. So you got to make your own like game and gamify it, because otherwise you just get lazy. So that sounds very unhealthy in a mindset, but it's actually necessary to be able to accomplish great things. You got to be able to motivate yourself and the team around you to focus on the shorter term. Like, here's what we need to accomplish. And I think it's very important to do. So, is it perfect? No. Does it evolve? Does it change quite frequently? Is the hardest thing to do at any moment in time know where to spend your time and know where your team should be spending their time? Yes. So, you know, I've got better at that and communicating. Here's our goals and objectives. Here's the next 30 days. And then here's what I'm working on, speaking out loud at the company because we work fully remotely. Here's what my goals are. Here's my sprint this week. Here's the thing I'm going to accomplish. And making sure that you're like putting a pin on the wall and saying, here are the three things I'm focused on, and here's what I'm going to accomplish, and letting the team know that. And then checking in with yourself at the end of the week and saying, did I do what I was intending to do, or did I get distracted? And often I get distracted. But, you know, it's it's an ongoing battle.
That resonated with me so much. I've had to do this since I was 11 years old, and now I have a Notion doc where I check things off,
Mhm.
and it's so gratifying. But it's interesting because for me, I had to start over because I didn't have the foundation, and I had like a half vision, but not a fully fledged vision. And I was doing it as I was, or I was building it as I was doing it. And you have to, it's so interesting because you learn so much about, wait a second, what is this? What is this actually doing for people? So that's really interesting. That I love how you set up your team for success that way. I learned the hard way. So
Well, let me give you another nugget of, you know, information, how I perceive the world and how I think listeners should think about what it's like to build businesses from scratch. When you come up with an idea and you take something from nothing to something, the majority of people will not see it the same way you do. And they'll tell you you're wrong and you're going to fail. And that's not going to work because of this reason, that reason, or this other reason. And they're just not going to resonate with them. Even in my current business, like I decided to pivot my business a year ago to focus on B2B influencer marketing on LinkedIn. Like, what? That's crazy. But I just knew it was going to work. And I just knew in my head that if I just applied myself extremely, like, focus myself so hard on my objectives and my goals to build this company, that eventually people will see it the way I see it. And it took 6 months of making the platform free for both brands and creators to build this marketplace, to, you know, the last 3 months we're like doubling our revenue every single month, and things are now starting to take off, and every single company is now coming to us and saying, hey, I heard about you, or I need to try this. I want to try influencer marketing. And I made this bet 12 months ago, and now it's starting to play out. And so the story of why I'm sharing that with you, Jolie, is that often people get frustrated at the lack of progress and the negativity around like launching a business and how long it takes to succeed and achieve greatness. But like, it takes a serious amount of grit and determination to be able to get no, no, no 10 times and then get one yes, and, you know, continue on and be happy and satisfied with that. So, you know, I don't know exactly where I'm going with that, but my main point is that it's really hard and people will think you're crazy. And to achieve really great things, you got to stick at it and be consistent and show up every day. Do that consecutively and it compounds. And then eventually people will see it the way you see it. and they'll catch on. And so that's the joy and the fun of it.
So, yeah, I was talking to Lachey Lewis, and she mentioned failure yourself into success, which that really aligns with what you're saying. So it's really cool to do this podcast because there are a lot of different perspectives, but a lot of entrepreneurs are dealing with the same challenges. So it's really interesting to get different takes on different topics, but they're all affecting you in different ways. So yeah, it's been a blast. Speaking of stress, if you couldn't rely on exercise or saunas, how would you manage your stress? What would be a tertiary option?
God, that's a toughie. I mean, those are my two go-tos. I'll tell you what I did in the past that didn't work. Alcohol, drinking, you know. I used to finish work super stressed, you know, 10-hour back-to-back meetings, and then I'd have 2 or 3 drinks almost every night. It started to just seep in. And it was great because I disconnected. Like, don't care about all those issues. There's a burning fire over there. I'll deal with that one tomorrow. I'm just going to have a drink. And that was not a good, healthy thing to do, which is obvious in hindsight. But at the time, it was the healthiest thing ever. It was the only thing that would actually like allow me to sit down and relax. This large glass of whiskey. The whiskey used to start like this big, and then it used to get like that big. Um, so don't do that. Don't lean on alcohol. Not a good idea. Then maybe that's the Irish in me that was just like, that's normal. It's like, no, it's not. Like, not good idea. I play a lot of golf, I would say. Like getting out into nature. I've realized like my golf game has got progressively worse the more I play. So I don't know what's going on there. Like everything else I invest in, I get better at. With golf, I get worse at. Yet I still go out and play. Why? Because it's not about the game and how well you strike the ball. It's about getting out into nature, walking around, exploring. Like you don't realize that when you're on a golf course, you're actually just walking around this big hill, with all of these nice nature like trees and grass and animals and things. I started to realize I come back so relaxed and compressed, decompressed after playing, even if I play the worst game of golf ever. And often I'm playing pretty bad. So yeah, that's probably my go-to is golf. And I love it and I hate it, but definitely gets my mind off things. Also, you don't have your phone out. I refuse to bring my phone out. So anything that I can just take your phone and put it into a box. And then maybe one other one I'll give you is like I often just leave my phone at home. I like put it on airplane mode, throw it into a room, close the door, and run the other way. And then I just go outside and I walk around and I stay as far away from my phone as possible. And so I'm very, I would say, aware of my hyper addictive nature to any email on laptop, desktop, or phone. So getting rid of them and disconnecting from devices is often the only way that I can stop working.
That's awesome. There's something called like a walking meditation. I mean, I don't have the attention span to do it. But you put your phone away, put it on charge, leave it at home, and you walk and you notice different things.
Mm.
And because when your mind focuses on one thing, you can't think about another,
Yeah.
which I probably should try, but no.
I think a different way of saying that, which is probably the thing that I'm getting at, is when you don't have your phone, you're much more present. And that goes for everything. Like, I don't bring my phone to restaurants sometimes. I'll be like, I'm not bringing my phone. And I'll be so much more present. I'll be so much more aware of my surroundings, who I'm with, and like looking for interactions between my son or my wife or the waiter. Than if I have my phone, I'm like, every so often, I'm like, yeah, that's moving along. Oh, that's, that email or that Slack message that I could have waited. I'm just going to like see it. So, yeah, maybe that's a bigger issue and topic to tackle, which is electronic devices and handheld wearables are the devil.
No, that's so true. We actually haven't talked about phones in the past episodes. It is so bad. It's just honestly, it's like a drug. I mean, not that I'm gonna ever give it away, but it's
The best types of drugs.
yeah, yeah, that and caffeine. Um, no, I think to your point, like, I actually do the same thing, like, my fiancé and I have date night once a week, and I do not bring my phone. because otherwise I'm like, oh, wait, I can't remember that movie. Who is that actress? Let me look it up. And then, and then it kind of ruins the moment, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
So pivoting a little bit, I think there's a big focus on, and you mentioned this, what you can control, what you can't control. So as a leader, how do you help your team avoid the fear of bad performance, speaking of corporation, and focus on what they can control?
So for me, it's very simple. You have to create an environment in which people can fail. And what I mean by that is, if you don't create a healthy work culture where people can experiment and fail, then everyone's going to be too scared to push boundaries or take initiative or, you know, take on maybe tasks or responsibilities that they don't have the experience for or haven't done before. And this is especially true in early stage companies. You need to give people the freedom to try things and fail. Calculated bets. Don't just try, you know, things and throw money down the drain and make huge swinging bets that are super, super risky. Like, it's calculated decision making and bets. And if you do that well, you'll have a team of people who want to work with you because you open doors for them, you accelerate their career, you help them like learn on the fly, learn from those around them. And I just have a rule, like, don't make the same mistake twice or you're going to hear from me. And I will notice if you make the same mistake twice, and I will remind you and give out to you because you've already made that mistake once. I think that's really an important thing to achieve or accomplish, is like a healthy work environment is one in which people feel confident and comfortable to take risks, make mistakes, do things they haven't done before, and not be feel reprimanded for it. Learn from it. Now, I will say, I have a saying that if you work with me or anyone chat with anybody that has worked with me in the past, I always say this, which is maximize the opportunities from the things you get right and minimize the downside risk from the mistakes that you make along the way. And what that really means is be hyper aware to when you take big swinging bets and you get something right, double down, triple down, quadruple down on that. When you take bets and you get things wrong, pull back and make sure that you're not too exposed. Like, you haven't set up, Google AdWords and set it to spend $1,000 a day and then caught up on it 7 days later. That would be dumb. So that's just a funny example of a scenario that could play out. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I think it's really important to have healthy culture that people can make mistakes and learn, and then grow together because we're human beings. We make mistakes every day.
This was awesome. Thank you so much. Where can everyone find you?
So I'm very loud and noisy on LinkedIn. You might notice I post 5 times a day. It is my business. It's what drives 90% of my growth at my company is my content on LinkedIn. My friends thinks I'm crazy, but if you want to go check me out on LinkedIn, it's David Walsh at Limelight or linkedin.com/DW1232. And then our website is limelighthq.com. Come check us out. DM me on LinkedIn. I'll respond back to you pretty quickly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jody.
That's a wrap for Revenue Mind, where we cut the BS and spotlight mental health and revenue leadership. I'm Jolie, reminding you your mindset is your competitive edge. Thanks for listening. See you next time.